The Galactic soldiers descended onto Earth with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Their gleaming starships carved through the atmosphere, casting shadows over the lush, sprawling jungle below. General Karsh stood at the forefront of his elite unit, his imposing figure silhouetted against the soft glow of the descending craft. "Primitive," he muttered, surveying the vibrant, untamed expanse. "Hardly a challenge for the galaxy's finest." Earth's representatives watched the scene in silence. They had warned the soldiers. They had begged them to reconsider using the jungle for their training exercises. But warnings fell on deaf ears. Karsh had dismissed them outright, his confidence bolstered by advanced weaponry and centuries of military triumphs across countless worlds. "This isn't just any jungle," one of the humans had tried to explain. "It's older, deeper, more alive than you realize." Karsh's only response was a dismissive smirk. "It's just flora and fauna. Our tech will handle it." Turning to his troops, he barked orders. "Deploy the drones. Let's map this chaos and turn it into something useful." The soldiers moved with mechanical efficiency, their exocets gleaming in the midday sun. Swarms of drones buzzed to life, scattering through the canopy like metallic bees. Data began streaming to their consoles: heat signatures, topography, species scans. The jungle seemed to reveal itself in layers of green, brown, and shadow. The soldiers were unimpressed. "This is a joke," one of them said, smirking as he swatted away an oversized insect that had landed on his visor. "Back home, we'd call this a garden." Another chuckled, kicking at a root protruding from the ground. "We should rename this place. How about Galactic Kindergarten?" The general joined in their laughter, his voice echoing through the clearing. "Careful," he said mockingly. "These vines might just trip you up." The humans stood a short distance away, their unease growing. One of them, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, took a step forward. "You don't understand," she said, her voice firm despite the odds stacked against her. "You don't own this jungle. The jungle owns itself." Her words hung in the air, met with nothing but derisive chuckles. The soldiers had no patience for superstition or sentiment. They moved deeper into the jungle, undeterred, their boots trampling over ancient roots and delicate ferns. For the first hour, everything seemed routine. Drones reported back with precision, mapping the terrain and identifying wildlife. The jungle, despite its density, appeared to be exactly what Karsh had expected: chaotic but ultimately conquerable. Then, things began to change. A drone went offline. It wasn't unusual. Machines malfunctioned occasionally, but then another disappeared. And another. Within minutes, an entire squadron of surveillance units had gone silent. The soldiers noticed, though none of them voiced their concerns. They had been trained to remain calm under pressure, and besides, there was nothing the jungle could throw at them that they couldn't handle. Or so they thought. It was Private Jalen who vanished first. He had been walking near the rear of the group when his comms cut out mid-sentence. "Something's moving." Static. When the others turned, Jalen was gone. No trace, no sound. Just an eerie stillness where he had stood moments before. "Probably got himself lost," one soldier muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Karsh waved them forward. "Keep moving. He'll find his way back." They pressed on, but the tension was palpable. The jungle, which had seemed merely vibrant before, now felt oppressive. The air was thick, the shadows darker, and the sounds, chirps, rustles, distant calls, seemed to close in around them. A low growl echoed through the underbrush, stopping the group in their tracks. Weapons were drawn, their energy cores humming as the soldiers scanned the surrounding foliage. The growl came again, closer this time. Something large was out there, hidden among the leaves. Karsh's comm unit crackled. "Sir?" came a voice from another squadron, stationed a few kilometers away. "We've lost contact with the southern team. No visuals, no comms. It's like they've disappeared." The general's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Hold your position. This is just a simulation. We'll recover them." He didn't believe his own words. As they advanced, more signs of the jungle's defiance emerged. Vines seemed to shift underfoot, tripping soldiers and tangling equipment. Trees creaked ominously, as though watching. The animals, once distant, began to encroach on their space, eyes glinting in the shadows, movements swift and deliberate. A soldier muttered, "This isn't right. It's like the jungle's alive." Karsh snapped, "Enough of that nonsense. Focus on the mission." But even he couldn't shake the unease creeping into his thoughts. This was no ordinary wilderness. And whatever had taken Jalen, and the others, was far from done. The soldiers moved deeper into the jungle, their unease growing with every step. The vibrant, chaotic wilderness that had seemed like an unthreatening training ground now felt alien, almost hostile. The drones that hadn't malfunctioned were sending back erratic signals, their scans disrupted by an untraceable interference. Even the advanced mapping tech, capable of charting the most treacherous terrains, struggled to keep up as the jungle seemed to shift, pathways disappearing, new ones forming as if the terrain itself was alive. Private Rena, a seasoned soldier, was the first to speak aloud what others had been thinking. "It's like it's watching us," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves and distant animal calls. Her squad mate laughed nervously, but no one dismissed her outright. General Karsh, maintaining his facade of control, barked orders to keep moving. "We are the most advanced military force in the galaxy. This is nothing more than overgrown foliage and wildlife. Stay sharp, stay focused." But even his voice carried a note of tension. Then came the second disappearance. Corporal Drez had been securing a perimeter when his comm went silent. No scream, no struggle, just dead air. When the squad reached his last known position, all they found was his plasma rifle lying in the dirt, vines slowly creeping over it as if reclaiming it for the jungle. Karsh ordered a sweep of the area, but the jungle closed in tighter. Vines seemed to move of their own accord, tangling boots and snagging armor. Branches that had been still moments before swayed and cracked without wind. The canopy above thickened, dimming the already weak sunlight. The soldiers' visibility shrank to mere meters. The jungle, once noisy with chirps and rustles, grew eerily silent. The oppressive quiet was broken only by the occasional snap of a branch or the distant, guttural growl of something large and unseen. Tensions reached a breaking point when another soldier screamed, his cry cut short as he was yanked into the underbrush by something too fast to see. The others fired blindly into the greenery, their energy blasts illuminating nothing but trees and vines. Panic set in. "What the hell is this place?" One soldier shouted, his voice shaking. Another yelled, "This isn't natural! Nothing is supposed to move like that!" Karsh clenched his fists, his calm exterior beginning to crack. "Hold your ground!" he roared. But the jungle offered no respite. It was as if every plant, every creature, was working in unison, hurting them deeper into its heart. Suddenly, the jungle showed its teeth, literally. From the shadows emerged creatures the soldiers couldn't have imagined even in their worst nightmares. The first to appear was a predator the size of a small vehicle, its body blending seamlessly with the foliage. Its skin shifted colors like the leaves around it, and its movements were eerily silent. Before anyone could react, it lunged, taking down two soldiers in one swift motion. Energy weapons fired, illuminating the dense greenery with bursts of light. The predator flinched but adapted quickly, its skin hardening where the plasma bolts struck. It vanished into the shadows as swiftly as it had appeared, leaving behind only the carnage. The soldiers regrouped, their formation tightening as fear threatened to overtake discipline. But the jungle was relentless. Swarms of smaller, insect-like creatures descended on them, bypassing armor with razor-sharp precision. A soldier screamed as the swarm overwhelmed him, his cries echoing before being drowned in the collective buzz. "This isn't a fight," Brenna said, her voice trembling. "It's a massacre." Karsh's attempts to organize a counterattack proved futile. The jungle adapted faster than any strategy he could deploy. A detonation meant to clear the area resulted only in vines regrowing at an unnatural speed, thicker and more resilient than before. The soldiers' energy shields flickered as something in the jungle's atmosphere interfered with their power sources. Karsh called for air support, but the interference extended to orbit. Communication with the fleet above became sporadic, their transmissions garbled and incomplete. The realization dawned on him: they were isolated, cut off from their reinforcements, and entirely at the mercy of this alien wilderness. It was then that the first hints of intelligence became undeniable. Patterns began to emerge in the jungle's attacks. The predators targeted those who wandered too far from the group, while the smaller creatures focused on disabling equipment. It was coordinated, deliberate. This wasn't just a hostile environment, it was a battlefield controlled by an unseen force. For the first time, Karsh felt the weight of a realization he refused to voice. They were not the hunters here. They were the prey. As the soldiers huddled together, scanning the shadows for the next attack, the jungle's intent became clear. It wasn't just defending itself, it was testing them. And with every failure, it grew bolder, its strategies more precise. Karsh's bravado faltered as he muttered under his breath, "What have we walked into?" But the jungle, indifferent to his question, continued its relentless onslaught. It wasn't done with them yet. The soldiers, battered and dwindling in number, were no longer the confident force that had landed on Earth. Their formation was tight, weapons drawn, but their eyes darted nervously between the trees. Each step forward felt like an invitation for the jungle to strike again. The sense of being watched was no longer subtle. It was oppressive, an almost physical weight pressing down on them. It was then that a voice, calm but commanding, broke through the tension. "If you keep moving like this, none of you will make it out alive." The soldiers spun around, weapons aimed, only to see a group of humans emerge from the foliage. They weren't dressed in modern gear but in natural materials, their bodies painted in patterns that seemed to blend seamlessly with the jungle. Their leader, a woman with piercing eyes, stood at the front. "Who are you?" Karsh demanded, his voice sharp but tinged with exhaustion. "We are the Guardians," she said simply. "This jungle is our home. We've lived here for centuries, in harmony with its will. You, on the other hand, have angered it." Karsh bristled. "Angered it? It's a jungle, not some sentient being." The woman smiled faintly, as though she had heard this argument countless times. "You think your weapons and technology make you superior, but this place is older and smarter than you can imagine. It's alive, General, and it sees you as a threat." Her words hung in the air, met with skepticism and silence. Then she turned to the human representative who had accompanied the soldiers. "You warned them, didn't you? They never listen." Before Karsh could retort, another soldier cried out. The jungle shifted again, vines creeping closer, as if responding to the tension. The guardian woman raised her hand, and the movement stopped. "It's giving you a chance," she said. "But only one." Karsh, desperate for a solution but unwilling to admit defeat, gestured for her to continue. The Guardians explained the truth. The jungle was not just an ecosystem but a complex, semi-sentient network. At its core was a vast fungal organism, an ancient intelligence that had evolved to protect its domain. Every plant, animal, and insect was part of its system, acting as its eyes, ears, and weapons. "It remembers everything," the Guardian leader said. "Every fire, every tree felled, every life taken without need. It doesn't forgive easily." The soldiers listened in stunned silence. Karsh, still clinging to his authority, shook his head. "You expect me to believe we're at war with a fungus?" The Guardian's eyes narrowed. "You're not at war. You're being punished." She went on to explain that the jungle's intelligence had been dormant for years, content to coexist with the humans who respected its boundaries. But the arrival of the Galactic soldiers, their machines, their weapons, had awakened it. To the jungle, they were invaders, no different from the countless others who had tried and failed to conquer it in the past. "You came here thinking you could control it," she said. "But it has already adapted to you. The more you fight, the stronger it becomes." Karsh opened his mouth to argue but stopped when he saw the expressions on his remaining troops. They were no longer looking to him for guidance. Their eyes were on the Guardians, on the human representative, on the jungle itself. For the first time, he realized his authority meant nothing here. Reluctantly, he asked, "What do we do?" The Guardians exchanged glances, then the leader spoke. "You need to stop thinking like soldiers and start thinking like survivors. The jungle doesn't respond to force. It responds to respect." They began teaching the soldiers how to move without disturbing the jungle, how to read its subtle warnings, how to avoid triggering its defenses. The soldiers, stripped of their pride, followed instructions without question. They camouflaged themselves with mud and foliage, silenced their weapons, and moved as one with the environment. For a time, the attacks subsided. The jungle seemed to watch, its movements less aggressive, though no less vigilant. It was as if it was testing them, waiting to see if they had truly learned their lesson. But the peace was short-lived. As they moved deeper into the jungle, they reached a clearing unlike anything they had seen before. The air was thick with humidity, the ground covered in a bioluminescent web of fungal veins that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. At the center stood an enormous tree, its roots twisting into the earth like claws. This, the Guardians explained, was the core, the heart of the jungle's intelligence. "It knows you're here," the leader said. "And it won't let you leave unless you prove you're no longer a threat." Karsh felt a chill run down his spine. He was a soldier, trained to face enemies of flesh and blood, not something as incomprehensible as this. He looked to the Guardians. "What does it want?" "Understanding," the leader replied. "And humility." Before Karsh could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. From the shadows emerged one of the jungle's apex predators, its massive form blotting out the light. It was unlike anything they had faced before, a creature of impossible size and strength, its body covered in bioluminescent patterns that seemed to shift and pulse in time with the fungal network. The soldiers raised their weapons instinctively, but the Guardians shouted for them to stop. "You can't fight it!" the leader yelled. "This is its domain. Show it you mean no harm." Karsh hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to attack. But something in the predator's gaze stopped him. It wasn't mindless. It was watching him, waiting. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. One by one, the soldiers followed suit. The predator let out a low growl but did not attack. Instead, it stepped aside, revealing a path leading deeper into the core. The Guardians nodded. "You've been given a chance. Don't waste it." The path led them into a chamber unlike anything they had encountered. It was as if the jungle had opened its heart to them, revealing the core of its vast intelligence. The air was heavy with moisture, and the bioluminescent fungal veins pulsed with a rhythmic hum, each vibration resonating in their chests. The massive tree at the center seemed to breathe, its bark shimmering faintly as though alive. General Karsh stood frozen, his pride and bravado stripped away. He had faced enemies across the galaxy, defeated armies, and conquered worlds, but nothing had prepared him for this. The jungle wasn't just alive, it was aware. It had been watching, calculating, and adapting to their every move. And now, it demanded something he didn't fully understand. The Guardian leader stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "You stand before something ancient, something that has endured more than you could imagine. It does not fear your weapons or your technology. It only seeks to know if you've learned your place." Karsh's throat tightened, his instinct to command clashing with the realization that this was beyond his control. He turned to the human representative, the only other figure who seemed to understand what was happening. "What does it want from us?" The representative's gaze was steady. "It wants to see if you can show respect. If you can admit you're wrong." Karsh's jaw tightened, but he nodded. For once, words escaped him. He stepped closer to the tree, the faint hum growing louder as he approached. His soldiers followed, their movements hesitant, every step feeling like it could be their last. As they stood before the tree, the ground beneath them shifted. The fungal network surged with light, and the air around them shimmered. Images began to form, not on any screen or hologram but in their minds. It was as if the jungle itself was speaking, showing them its memories. The visions were overwhelming. They saw centuries of devastation, trees torn down, rivers poisoned, species hunted to extinction. The pain of the jungle was palpable, each act of destruction resonating like a scream. And then came the invaders, those who had come before the Galactic soldiers. They had brought fire, machines, and arrogance. They had tried to tame the jungle, to bend it to their will. None had succeeded. The images shifted to the present. The soldiers saw themselves, their ships landing, their drones buzzing through the trees, their weapons tearing into the earth. They saw their arrogance, their dismissal of warnings, their belief in superiority. And they saw the jungle's response, its calculated, methodical resistance, its ability to adapt and strike back. Karsh felt his knees weaken. The weight of the jungle's memories pressed down on him, forcing him to confront the truth. They were not conquerors here. They were intruders, invaders in a world they did not understand. The visions faded, and the jungle's hum softened. The Guardian leader spoke again, her tone grave. It has shown you its pain. Now, it waits to see if you've truly understood. Karsh took a deep breath, his pride finally giving way to humility. He knelt before the tree, lowering his head. We were wrong, he said, his voice trembling. We came here thinking we could control this place, that we could take what we wanted without consequence. But this jungle, it's more than we ever imagined. It's alive, and it deserves our respect. His words hung in the air, the silence almost deafening. Slowly, his soldiers followed suit, kneeling beside him. For the first time since their arrival, they set aside their weapons, their defenses, and their arrogance. The jungle responded. The predator that had been watching from the shadows stepped forward, its massive form towering over them. But it did not attack. Instead, it lowered its head, its luminous patterns dimming slightly. The tension in the air eased, and the oppressive weight lifted. The Guardian leader nodded approvingly. It has accepted your apology. But remember, this is only the beginning. You've been given a chance to leave, not to return with the same intentions. Karsh stood slowly, his movements careful. He turned to his soldiers, his voice steady but softer than they had ever heard it. We leave. Now. No more drones, no more weapons. Just us. The trek back through the jungle was unlike their journey in. The vines that had once blocked their path now seemed to guide them. The animals watched from a distance but did not attack. Even the air felt lighter, as if the jungle had decided to let them go. When they reached the clearing where their ships were stationed, the soldiers hesitated. For a moment, they simply stood there, looking back at the jungle that had humbled them. Karsh turned to the human representative and the Guardians. We owe you, and this jungle, a debt we can never repay. The Guardian leader gave a small, knowing smile. Then honor it. Protect this place. Let the galaxy know what you've seen here. Karsh nodded, his expression resolute. As they boarded their ships, he issued a final order to his fleet. Earth is not a training ground. It is not a resource to be exploited. It is a sanctuary, and it will remain protected. As the ships ascended into the sky, the jungle's canopy closed over the clearing, its whispers carrying on the wind. It had shown mercy, but its memory was long. It would not forget.